and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for the launch of the International Energy Agency's new Renewables 2025 report. This is the latest edition of our annual market report on the sector. It follows on from other annual reports already published this year on electricity, critical minerals and oil, and I'd note that our gas market report comes out later this month, and the coal report will be coming in December. So I'm Jethro Mullen, head of the IEA's communications team, and I'm joined today by IEA Executive Director Fatih Birol and by Senior Energy Analyst Hamy Bahar, the lead author of the new report, which is freely available on the IEA website to read right now. So during today's event, Dr. Birol will make some opening remarks, and then Hamy will present the key findings of the report. We'll then take questions from journalists. For the journalists taking part in this press webinar, we invite you to send your questions via the Q&A function in the Zoom at any point. And we'll also take a 2-minute break right after the presentation to give you a chance to enter your questions. And so with that, I'll hand over to our Executive Director, Dr. Birol.
Thank you very much, Jethro. Greetings to all the colleagues from International Energy Agency headquarters. Dear colleagues, as my colleague Mr. Mullen said, we make annual reports on all fuels and all technologies, and today we are talking about renewable energy. Renewable energy has been one of the most dynamic sectors in the entire global energy markets. We have seen a very strong growth coming from solar, wind. Recently, a dynamic component of renewable energy has been the geothermal energy, pump hydro also growing very strongly. So we look at all these renewable energy technologies, what are the future prospects and what are the challenges. And our report looks today, but next 5 years, what the projections are. And one important message coming from our report before going to our projections and expectations, that while renewable energy sector grows strongly in many parts of the world, it is also facing some headwinds. Headwinds in terms of the integration of especially solar and wind to the grids. This is one. Second, again for solar and wind, the supply chain issues, concentration of supply chain in very few players there. Third, we see that the financing is a major headwind. In terms of technologies, today we see a serious challenge for the offshore wind. But in general, for emerging and developing countries, financing challenge is an important issue that we work a lot with the countries. And the fourth one is, of course, policy changes in different parts of the world has impact on the trends of the countries and also globally. Now, these are some of the headwinds, and I am sure my colleague Hamy Bahar will talk more about this. But maybe first start with what we expect 2025 this year. This year, dear colleagues, we expect a strong growth again in 2025. Our expectation is 750 gigawatts. Yes, we expect 750 gigawatts of renewables will be installed. This is, of course, an important number, and it is somehow, if I am not wrong, somehow 10%, 15% higher than last year. So 750 gigawatts is again impressive number. But if I compare with the renewable capacity, which is already finished or about to finish, it's about 1,700 gigawatts, are waiting to be connected to the grid. They are in the queue. It shows the grid congestion problem in a very clear way. So 750 gigawatts are being connected to the grid this year, and 1,700 gigawatts are in the queue. So this is something, of course, we need to take into account the grid issue that IEA has been for all energy sources highlighting for some time. In terms of generation, again, if you look at this year, we expect that the renewables, solar, wind, hydropower, bioenergy, geothermal, all together account more than 1/3 of the total global electricity generation, close to 35%, a significant amount. So this is the 2025, our expectation. Of course, we look at the future. We look at the future, and based on current policy settings, we expect a strong growth of renewables, 4,600 gigawatts. 4,600 gigawatts. It is double what we have today, and maybe even more impressive if I put it from the perspective that the 4,600 gigawatts is equal to the total electricity installed capacity of China, EU, and European and Japan. China, EU, and Japan put together. So 4,600 gigawatts is equal to China, EU, and Japan put together. Very impressive. Very impressive. So where do they come from? So solar. Solar is the dominant contributor to this 4,600 gigawatts. It is more than 80% of this 4,600 comes from solar. Why solar? First, it is the cost issue, lowest cost in many areas, and also quick to install. And also the permitting times for solar is much faster, and installations are much faster because people need electricity as soon as possible. So where in terms of countries, there are already, we talk all the time, the established economies, established markets, but there are some new players emerging here in terms of their contribution to the solar push, such as Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and some of the Southeast Asian countries such as Indonesia, Vietnam, and Thailand. They are all contributing to this strong growth coming from solar. As for wind, we see a strong growth as well, but especially on the onshore wind, because offshore wind expectations, my colleagues Hemi and his team, he has a great team working on these issues on a day-to-day basis. All the numbers, all the projects, all the investment we follow very close around the world. Our expectation of offshore wind is much less optimistic this year compared to previous years, mainly as a result of financial difficulties that some of the companies are facing around the world. One technology I want to highlight here is geothermal energy. Some of you may remember that my colleagues, again a big team, we put together at the IEA with my colleague Hemi Bahar, Brent Venner, and the others, look at the geothermal energy, the future of geothermal energy. And as we have expected in this report, it was, Jetro, if I'm not wrong, about 1 year ago, we published that report here. And that report, we said that we expect a growing contribution from geothermal energy, both from the markets which use the established traditional technologies, but also using the next generation advanced technologies. And here our expectation was spot on. We see that the geothermal energy getting a boost in the markets such as Indonesia, Turkey, Japan, but we also see a strong growth and dynamism in the United States, especially coming from the driven by the next generation advanced technologies, using similar technologies that they have experienced in terms of the horizontal drilling and what they have used our U.S. colleagues in the shale business. So this is the geothermal there. And when I look at the 4,600 gigawatts, as I said, impressive China plus EU plus Japan equivalent of total power capacity. It is about, compared to what we expected last year, it is 5% less than what we thought we should reach in 2030. We have lowered our forecast mainly as a result of policy changes in the United States and in China. So we have lowered the forecast in both these two major economies, but we have increased our expectations in some other economies or regions. One of them is European Union. The other one is India. I will come in a moment, Southeast Asia, and as I mentioned, Middle East and North Africa. Recently, we made a report on the Middle East, North Africa electricity outlook, which is, I recommend many of you to have a look at it. In my view, it is one of the blind spots of the Middle East energy system, because when we talk about Middle East, we normally think of oil and gas, but the electricity demand is growing very strongly in Middle East, and solar energy is set to play an important role in that context. So from these countries, we have revised up India, EU, Middle East, and Southeast Asia, whereas we lowered down our expectations in the United States and China as a result of policy changes. Maybe one word on India. India is growing very strongly, and now India has the second place after China in terms of its renewable capacity. Very impressive result as a result of the Indian governments under the leadership of Prime Minister Modi pushing the renewables in a strong manner. So, dear colleagues, this growth is, again, as I said, 4,600 gigawatts in between now and 2030. When we look at this, when we compare this, some of you may remember that some 2 years ago, the countries around the world came together in the United Arab Emirates for the COP28 meeting. And at that meeting, they put a target, some 200 countries, to triple the renewable capacity. And the numbers that my colleague Mr. Bahar and his team produced based on the current policy setting, they will go 2.6 times compared to 3 times, which was the target, which shows that this 3 times factor of 3 expansion is still within reach. So again, this strong growth is driven by solar, the dominant source, but also wind, hydropower, geothermal, bioenergy. They all contribute to that. So perhaps to finish, to say that I really wanted to remind everybody that the renewables, building the power plants is something, but to link it to the grids in a secure and cost-effective way is another thing. Let's don't forget it. And also, again, in renewables, both for solar PV manufacturing and also for the wind turbines, the rare earth elements are very much concentrated in one single country. We at the IEA believe that the diversification is the golden rule number one for energy security. So as such, we wanted to make this heads up to the renewable developers and countries around the world. Before passing the word to my colleague Hemi Bahar, and to thank him and his team for this very good work based on thousands of data points around the world, I should say that the renewables are growing strongly, all type of renewables, and the pace of growth of renewables will be determined mainly by the governments around the world. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol, for this introductory remarks. I would like to go through several slides showing the analysis that we have conducted over the last year. First of all, I would like to start with a bit of the historical developments. As you can see, the growth of renewables between different technologies have been more balanced historically. However, in the future, we are seeing more and more the dominance of PV. We are expecting about 4,600 gigawatts of new capacity becoming operational in the coming 5 years, and 80% of this will come from a single technology, which is solar PV. This basically highlights several important features of solar PV. The first one being it's significantly faster to permit solar PV plants. It's actually in many places half of the time of permitting other renewable technologies, but it's also faster to install. The second important feature is that with the recent reduction of the prices, solar PV has become in many countries in the world the cheapest way of meeting new electricity demand. So the costs are still going down. So this is an important factor of choice for many companies and the utilities to buy solar PV. But also the important factor is that that solar PV is quite impressive, is that the small installations, as we call them, distributed solar PV. Those installations are installed by individuals or the companies to use solar PV for their own generation. We have seen a significant growth of these systems over the last few years, including the small ones in the developing countries that are helping people and the companies to have a better access of electricity or a cheaper access of electricity in the future. We expect still, despite the several challenges of the industry, which I will come back in a minute, wind sector to also continue growing. Actually, its growth doubles in the coming 5 years, mostly driven by onshore wind. There are several markets in the world that address long permitting timelines, which affect our forecast, but also onshore wind is moving into several new markets that hasn't exploited the renewable energy source. So we see an expansion of onshore wind in many markets in the world. Offshore wind situation, as our executive director mentioned, is a bit more complicated. There are multiple projects has been cancelled or suspended in many parts of the world, in North America, Europe, and Asia. So that's why we reflected this in our forecast. Actually, in terms of the revisions, in terms of the relative revisions, offshore wind has the largest downward revision we had in the forecast, which is about 25%. But also other technologies are very important, especially to deliver firm electricity to the grids and to help integrate the solar PV and wind. We are seeing two important trends. The first one is that pumped hydro storage installations are accelerating many parts of the world. The governments realize the importance of long-term storage, so we are seeing that growth, but also geothermal expansion is also going rapidly. This doesn't take us to the tripling. This growth is very strong. I would like to highlight that 4,600 gigawatts in the next 5 years means that everything that the renewable industry invested and installed over the last 40 years. So we are achieving 40 years of achievement in 5 years to be able to achieve those installations. But this is still far from tripling, so 2.6 gigawatts, because we see important challenges related to still permitting, policy uncertainties, grid integration, and financing. So the forecast revision that we did, as previously mentioned, is 5% globally, but there is a mixture of the countries who are going up or down. I would like to go through them very quickly. We are expecting United States renewable forecast 45 to 50% lower in the next 5 years. The reason is actually the change in the federal tax credits. Historically, since mid-1990s, tax credits have been the main driver of growth for renewable energy installations in the United States. Every time there has been a delay in or extension or a delay on the tax credits, U.S. renewable energy sector has been impacted. So the recent changes of the earlier phase out of the tax credits is impacting our forecast, which is reflected here, both for utility scale and smaller installations. This is how we see the market reacting to these changes. There are also other policies that accompany those, which reflected in our forecast as today's policy settings. In China, there was a major change of the policy as well in November 2024, since we published our report. This is moving from the fixed tariffs to competitive auctions. In terms of the policy type, this is a good development, but in terms of the profits of the renewable energy companies, we expect their remunerations will be lower and thus impacting the installations. We revised down China forecast by 5% based on this. In Sub-Saharan Africa, we also have a small downward revision because of continuous challenges related to financing, as also mentioned by our executive director. There are a lot of developments in Sub-Saharan Africa, but for large hydropower projects and large solar PV and wind projects, we see important hurdles to see in the next 5 years, both on the grid infrastructure side, but also on the financing side. But we have also important developments in European Union, India, ASEAN, and the Middle East. We revised up our forecast. I'll start with the highest revision, which is the Middle East and North Africa. This is driven by Saudi Arabia, which has an important goal to achieve and extremely accelerated developments and installations going forward. So we reflected that in our forecast. Also in Southeast Asian countries, there are new targets and new policies implemented since we published our last report, which is also reflected in the forecast. India is basically an example of policy improvements over the past 5 years. Every year we are revising our India forecast based on the reaction of the Indian government towards the challenges concerning the land use, financing, and the policy design. So we are basically reflecting that in our forecast. In EU, we also see utility scale developments accelerating in several markets based on the corporate demand for electricity. However, there are a lot of challenges on the buyers and the supplier side. There is an important challenge on the manufacturer's component. Still in China, we see an important losses in the solar PV companies. Obviously, over the last 5 years, there's been some profits, but last year, the profit margins declined by over 10%, which means that $5 billion of losses are made by the Chinese solar PV manufacturers. On the wind side, the outside of China, still we are seeing important hurdles. The manufacturers are still making losses, and this challenge is expected to continue a little further, impacting the industry. But on the investor side, on the developer side, we have a sort of a more balanced approach. We surveyed the largest investors of renewables, and we see that most of them, despite the headwinds that we described, are still expecting to deploy the same level of capacity for 2030 that they promised to their investors. Even some companies, about a quarter of them, are actually improved their expectations for 2030, and several ones are reduced their expectations. These are mostly the offshore wind companies. And we also expect the buyers of the renewable energy having a more impact in terms of the deployment of renewables. For the first time, we see about 30% of the growth coming from corporate demand and bilateral contracts, and actually which are basically going forward without any support. Last important point that is the supply chain concentration. For solar PV, this has been an important factor. We mentioned this several times since 2022. China remains by far the biggest concentration of the solar PV, around 90% for all levels of the installations. But also the same thing holds true for the magnets for solar PV and rare earth minerals that is produced, which is about 90% of the concentration. Last is the grid integration. We are seeing basically curtailment on the rise. We are tracking country by country the curtailment. Today, about 100 terawatts of the renewable capacity is basically could not be delivered to the customers and cut. But curtailment levels are on the rise, but still manageable. But there are big differences between countries and technologies. As you can see, several important key countries are seeing the curtailment levels reaching between 10 to 15%, depending on the technology. This is an important point to cost effectively and integrate the renewables into the electricity markets. There's one important need that most electricity markets need today with growing renewables is investment in storage, electricity markets, and flexibility. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Hamy, for the presentation. So we now have time to take some questions. We invite the journalists in attendance to send your questions through the Q&A function of the Zoom if you haven't done so already. And please mention your media outlets along with your name and question. We'll just take a 2-minute break to give you a chance to enter your questions, and we'll be right back. Thank you.
5, 4, 3.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Thank you very much to the journalists for the questions. We'll get through as many of them as we can in the time that we have. So working through the ones we have one from Lucy Pedrola from RSE Data News. She notes that the accelerated case in this report sees global renewable capacity reaching 2.8 times its 2022 level by 2030 if countries adopt enhanced policies. She says the EU plans an energy omnibus for the end of this year. So in that instance, what policies should the EU add to its current policies to enable an acceleration in renewable deployment? And then there's also a question about the Middle East, noting the very rapid increase in solar deployment in the Middle East. What is the reason for this? Why is solar being deployed so strongly in the Middle East? Haimi, perhaps you can talk a bit about what Europe can do, and then Dr. Birol can speak about solar.
First of all, Europe has done already a lot in terms of the acceleration of renewables since the Russia's invasion of Ukraine. It was an important energy crisis that Europe wanted to accelerate its dependence. In that sense, it has done a lot of the policies, but there are still hurdles. I will basically mention a few of them in terms of the improvements. The first one, permitting timelines has been reduced, but only in several countries, not all of them, despite European Union guidance. So Germany is a very good example that basically implemented these policies very strongly. So that's why we regularly look at Germany as a good example of implementing these policies. But at the same time, this is not widely implemented throughout all the European Union countries, so accelerating the permitting is the most important one. But the second one, as our executive director mentioned, there are a lot of projects waiting to be connected. So grid investment has been quite slow in the European Union over the past decades. So now it's picking up, but it's important to accelerate those projects to connect renewables. And the third one is there's an important demand for corporate clients to buy renewables in terms of the meeting new electricity demand for data centers, electrification and cooling. But it's also important that governments also introduce the policies and the certainty in terms of the auctions. There are several markets who have done this, seeing an important positive developments, but others, if they can give some clarity on the auction timelines, that will also help to accelerate renewables.
So about Middle East and solar, thank you. But maybe one thing that to complement this grid issue, IEA has been ringing the alarm bells, not only for Europe, but almost all around the world, in many countries, grids. And one important indicator for us is we look at how much money is invested in building power plants and how much money is invested in building grids infrastructure. So currently it is, if we invest $1 in power plants, building power plants, we invest $0.5 for grids. To have a secure and a reliable electricity system, we think it should be 1-to-1. If we invest $1 for power plants, we need to invest $1 for grids. So grids need to make a strong pushback investments there, important for the governments, regulators, companies, and beyond. Coming back to Middle East, so dear colleagues, the Middle East electricity demand growth has been, as I said a few minutes ago, a blind spot in the global energy dialogue. In fact, the growth of electricity demand in Middle East is third after just China and India. Very strong growth, driven by the air conditioning, except for the Gulf region. When you look at the MENA region, the air conditioning ownership is very low levels, and with the increasing temperatures and increasing incomes, people buy air conditioners, which in turn is a driver for electricity consumption. The second one is electricity needed for the desalination of water. It's a major issue in Middle East and North African countries. 7 out of 8 water stressed countries in the world are in the MENA region. So for the strong demand growth, there are different technologies to meet that demand growth, and solar appears to be one of the favorite ones for many countries, and because solar radiation is very strong. As my colleague Mr. Bahar mentioned, the cost of solar is much lower than many others, and at the same time some countries, such as some of the oil exporting countries, they have policies in order to replace the burning oil to generate electricity with solar, so that they have more oil to export. So to sum up, it is not a surprise, it's a new finding. Amy, thank you and to your team, but it is something worthwhile after now. When people talk about the future of solar, it is not only the established markets, but the countries like Saudi Arabia, other Middle East countries, as well as Pakistan, for example, or the Southeast Asian countries also play a role.
Thank you, Dr. Birol. So a few more questions to get through. Some of them looking at these grid challenges and energy security challenges that renewables are navigating. One here on China from Junior Isles from the Energy Industry Times. He asks, can you expand on how China's shift from fixed tariffs to auctions is affecting project economics? Do you have any additional numbers you can share? Then from Jamie Ingram from MEES, he asks, he notes that the cost of renewables has come down sharply over the last decade, and asks whether we expect a similar drop in the price of battery storage going forward, and is there a concern that supply chain risks from the concentration of mineral supplies in a small number of countries could slow the uptake? I guess that's a question for both renewable technologies and batteries and battery storage. And then just one other aspect of the grid issue that you were talking about, whether there's a difference in terms of the integration challenges for decentralized renewables like rooftop solar in maybe more in developing economies versus when countries already have the grid and they're deploying renewables into an existing grid. Sorry, that's from Kelvin Ross from Enlit. So I don't know if we have any insights on that. And obviously we're talking about solar, and a broader question that was flagged is why is solar growing so much faster than any other technology? Why is it 80%? Because that really is such a huge share of the total. And Dr. Birol touched on this a bit, but what are the global factors here? So quite a few questions to get through. We'll try and cover them all. I'll let Amy start off with, there's the China one, and then there's the supply chains one.
Sure. So China's major policy change at the end of last year is basically moving towards the former fixed tariffs that was giving a lot of certainty to renewable energy developers with the 20 to 25-year contracts at fixed prices. However, China is establishing a new electricity market. It's liberalizing its electricity market, is moving to wholesale markets, and they are introducing a European policy, which is a contract for difference. And this contract for difference is a very good policy. It's an exemplary policy to deploy renewables, which has been tried many years in the UK and now all European Union. However, obviously the competition, and especially the first signs of the competition that we see in Chinese markets in several provinces, is seeing prices going down and revenues going down. That's why the profitability of the renewable projects, especially solar and wind, is expected to decline between 10 to 15% with the new policy. So with this, obviously there will be less interest, especially for technologies that are more expensive, such as offshore wind or other renewable technologies. So in that sense, that is the China-related question. And the second one was on integration and batteries.
Yeah, and the supply chains.
Okay. So obviously the battery is a new forefront of the renewable deployment. Already over the last decade, there has been incredible decline in the battery storage costs, driven by the demand from electric cars, but also the storage for electricity, large-scale storage, which we are seeing in many markets growing very rapidly for the integration of renewables already today. They are helping to store the electricity when there is a lot of generation of renewables. It also helps reduce the curtailment challenge that we have talked about. However, it needs to accelerate, and the costs are expected to continue to decline, obviously. But again, the same challenge, as we mentioned in our previous critical minerals outlook report, that in the battery as well, there is also a concentration of the minerals and the production and the refining in one single country mostly. So the same issue remains, the dependencies. And whether it slows down the deployment, there has been several examples of this, that the supply was not available, and that's why there has been delays in the project. So diversification is the key, as our executive director mentioned, and we are seeing certain signs of diversification, but it needs to be accelerated.
And then perhaps on solar, why is solar dominating so much?
Okay, I just mentioned that solar, and this is the last question, I guess. No, okay, because we have to go to other things. So solar PV is because it is much cheaper than many other alternatives, and at the same time, this is very important. It is much faster to connect. No, this is the permitting timelines are much shorter, and the installation is quicker. Maybe I should also add that up to now we talk mainly on the PV, but a big chunk of the solar growth comes from a rooftop, and the many households and the commercial buildings are using rooftop solar in order to reduce their bills. And in several developing countries, in the area that IEA works a lot, the access to electricity, the rooftop solar is also very helpful. So these are the reasons. And if I may, Jetro, I just get a notification from my colleagues in this new studio. We have more technical capabilities. We have understood more than 30,000 viewers are following this our launch here. So many thanks to them, and we hope to see them in our next publications coming out. I guess we will have natural gas, world energy outlook, coal, and others. And again, thank you to Hemi and his great dedicated team to bring this report together. Over to you, Jetro.
Thank you very much, Dr. Birol. Thank you very much, Hemi. That's all we have time for. Today, we've covered as many questions in the time we have. If any journalists have further questions, we invite you to reach out to our press office, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. And thank you very much to all the journalists for the questions. Thank you to everyone following the event online for your interest in our work. And just a reminder that the full Renewables 2025 report is freely available on our website. So do take a look and dig into the numbers. And as Dr. Birol mentioned, we have lots more important reports coming very soon. So stay tuned for those. Thank you and goodbye.